everyone. So today marks the start of a new venture for us at Just Money. This is our first ever podcast, and it's really to commemorate July as National Savings Month. We'll be chatting about our personal tips around saving. And then on the line, we've got Erica, who's our copy editor, and Aten Corsi, who is our senior writer. We're going to just chat. My name is Shafika Anthony, by the way. I'm marketing manager over at Just Money. And today we're really just going to chat about some of the financial tips and savings tips in particular that we each have. You know, we've come from very different backgrounds and cultures. And so we really just want to tap into that and see if there's some gold nuggets that we can then share with you. So I think to start off with, Erica, do you want to maybe go through some of your most recent tips or savings tips rather that you can maybe share with us?
Yeah, sure. So I think during this time, the critical thing is to try and keep your costs as low as possible. A lot of people have lost their income, or their income's been reduced because of the pandemic, obviously, and the economic repercussions. So for me, it's very much about trying to scrape a little off all of my expenses each month. So some of the things that I've always done, I'm still doing, but I'm kind of trying to do more prominently now. So for example, if I've got a pricey item that I need to purchase, a printer, or things always seem to go bung when you least need it, I'll always do extensive research first. I'll look on all of the online shops, and then I'll wait for the specials to come up. Sometimes if you wish list or you cart with certain of the online shops, you actually get a notification when the specials come up. So I found that quite useful. And the other nice thing about carting and not just going ahead with expensive purchases is that it gives you time to cool off, to think, to make sure that you really need the item before just impulsively buying or going ahead. The other thing that I do, and I think a lot of people are aware of this, but some people may not realize that even with things like everyday items, like grocery items, most of the supermarkets now, if you look on the or the tags on the shelf talkers, if you like, they usually indicate the price per 100 grams of an item. And I think a lot of times we get caught out because we think buying in bulk or buying greater quantities of an item mean that it's going to be cheaper. But interestingly, sometimes it's more expensive buying in bulk. So I always look at the price per 100 gram for comparisons. So that's quite a good tip. And then the other thing is not to be brand sensitive. With things like coffee, obviously, most people are fairly brand sensitive, which is fair enough. But a lot of the time, even tin produce, the home brand tin produce is no less in quality than the branded stuff. So that's what I try and do, as well as avoid that brand preference if I can, and go for the brand that's running a special for that week. So they're small things, but they can end up shaving a lot off your total bill at the end of the month.
Very interesting. As you were talking, I was thinking about the buying bulk versus your single products. And I think the one place where and I'm not sure if they catch me out, actually, I don't know, but it's the 3 for 2 deals where you pay for 2 and you get a third one free. And I always find it to be really useful when it comes to things like shampoo and conditioner. Those things, in my opinion, are like highly overpriced. But still, I still tend to go with the brand names, just because I've had them growing up, or I'm so scared of what it's going to do to my daughter or my son's hair. But I tend to go for that. And one of the places that I tend to do that is with Clicks. So they often have this 3 for 2 deals. And I don't know if you guys also do that, but that's like the one thing that I don't, and I can't see how they can catch us out really, because you're paying for 2 and you're getting a third one free. And that's been like my saving grace. So I probably have like 5 bottles of shampoo inside, but rather that. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, definitely.
Yeah, I agree with you both. I do some of the things that you do, especially the buying the brand store things, store brand things. I do that a lot. Another thing that I do is just cut my subscriptions. I've cut all my DST subscriptions. I don't do Netflix anymore. And also shop around. So I go around and look for lower prices. And another thing that I do is just go through my bank statements every month before I get paid to see where I went wrong and where I could save money the next time I go shopping. So those are the things that I do. And another thing that I don't do is do immediate transfers. Those cost a lot of money. And when you're buying airtime on app, it's actually costly. And if you're doing with the USSD, it's actually free. So all those things, those are just some things that I do.
Yeah, I think I was actually going through my budget the other day, and I actually noticed things like value added fees, and then there's a service fee, and then there's another R1 here and a R2 there, and all these things, they add up. And so something that one of our colleagues, and I'm not sure, I think it was Danielle actually who spoke about how she's actually looked at her different accounts, looking at her current need, and then either changing the plan to match what her necessity is. So for example, if you're used to having an account that gives you benefits on going to the gym, for example, or the movies, then is it really the time now where you're going to be redeeming those anyway? So I thought that was a very good tip. So I looked at my budget with that in mind as well, taking into account the various accounts that I have. So it was very, very interesting to see what I now see that maybe before I didn't, because my financial mindset is just so different right now. And you know, while we're talking about the savings month and in the current context of the pandemic, I also want to touch on, you know, the fact that a lot of us can't save. Like, you know, we've cut where we can. We've looked at, you know, we've already cut out the things like DSTV and Netflix. And I wish I could, because I'm not a big TV watcher, but I've got kids. So unfortunately, it's something that I have to keep there for my sanity. But then let's talk about what happens when you're in a situation where you can't save. Like, is saving something where you can stop and then just continue? And obviously taking into account that we're not going to be able to save the same every month, right? Like, what is your approach to that, Erica?
For me, I think it's a case of, you've made a really valid point, Chef, in that it's often a stop-start thing at this time. Yeah. So if you've got the extra that you can put aside, then it's great if you can do it. And I think the key is to look for accounts or for savings or investment products that allow you to do that. So now would absolutely not be the time to tie yourself into something that requires that you put aside a certain amount each month, or there's a penalty or fees start to kick in, for example, if you don't deposit a certain amount each month. Avoid those altogether. I think the other thing is, if you're concerned that it is going to be a stop-start thing and you're not sure where you're going to be at, or you might need access to emergency funds, long-term deposits are a problem as well. And what I've found is that even the best interest rate on a long-term or fixed-term deposit can't compete with, you know, there are some exceptions, but in general can't compete with your basic unit trusts, your money market. So that's quite a flexible product. It does require a certain amount as an initial investment, depending on who you go with. But thereafter, depending on your account conditions, if you like, you don't need to set a certain amount aside each month. And if you need to withdraw, it's usually a maximum delay of about 5 to 7 days. And you're not going to get penalised for withdrawing as long as you still have the requisite minimum amount in your account. And if you can't do that, then you can just close the account altogether. So I think it's that flexibility of product that people need to look for now, as opposed to that product that's going to tie you into something so rigid that if you get into trouble, you're going to struggle to back out. The other really good savings vehicle that comes with zero commitment in terms of expectation for you to continue to deposit is if you have a bond. If you've got a home mortgage and you've got an access bond, which I would highly recommend to anyone that has a mortgage, then that's always going to be your best savings vehicle, because the interest that you're going to save, that you're not going to pay because you've paid additional into your mortgage, is always going to be more than the interest you're going to earn with the best unit trust, let's say, for example. So those are possibly some tips. And the thing about an access bond is, as its name suggests, you have access to it. If you need the funds in an emergency, you can take them out, no penalty. So yeah, those are the tips that I tend to follow.
Yeah. I was, you know, you just gave me another thought. We were writing an article recently and we did some investigation on balloon payments. I'm not sure if you guys remember. And one of the most interesting thing, and I don't think consumers are made aware of this, but a lot of people go in for the balloon payment because obviously they think, oh, it's 5 years from now, whatever the case may be, I'm going to get money or I'm going to save in the interim. And what happens is a couple of months before you realize, darn, like I don't have this bulk payment. And one thing that's actually that people can do, and this is something I found out through one of our colleagues, is that a year before the balloon payment was due, she actually got that balloon payment added to her fixed installment. So for the next year, yes, she was paying more, but by the time the balloon payment was due, she no longer needed to pay the balloon payment. And this is something that from my experience, just having spoken with people, is that they don't know this. And I'm not sure if everyone does this, if they do this, if they give you this option, but it's always a good thing just to ask. And I think that's where a lot of us fall short when it comes to when it comes to contracts, is we don't read. And we often don't ask the questions. We think, oh, it's silly, it's, I'm going to sound stupid, or, this is probably just above board because, it's been drawn up by a lawyer, whatever the case may be. But I always found that asking the questions often for your own understanding, just like to empower yourself and to educate yourself, is to completely understand what you're getting yourself into. I think that's so important, especially if it's a long-term contract.
Yeah, just weigh your options as well. Just look around the different sites, compare prices. I mean, we've got comparison calculators here at Just Money. And if you're not satisfied with that, I can go to other sites as well. But it's very important to compare prices and also look for other options.
100%, Ati. So, with National Savings Month, I think having done quite a few media interviews recently, the one question I always get asked, and I don't think there's an easy answer, is whether or not it would be a good time, so the current context, to dip into one savings. Now, for me, I kind of went with the answer that, ideally we shouldn't, but again, like, we've never lived through what we're living through right now. And at the end of the day, you've got to do what you got to do. Some medical aids do not cover some medical procedures, and what then? Medical is not something that it's a luxury. It's not something you should be deciding on whether or not you need to. It's something you've got to do. So I always lean towards, if there are other streams of income, if there are other opportunities, by all means. But if your only option to getting something paid for, like a medical emergency, is like dipping into your savings, then you've got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, you are right, Chef. There's nothing else that you can do. I mean, why not? What are you going to do? You're going to sit around with your savings where you can just dip on them? Like, no, just go for that. Yes. Well, on my side, I've always been a saver, though. I've always been a very frugal person. I've always understood my income, and I've always lived within it. So I've always save. Like, every time I get money, I don't use all of it. I always put some of it aside so that I have something when I need it. I have something to fall back on. So with me, it's always been something that I grew up with. It's something that I've been taught since I was growing up. I mean, I've talked about this. My mother used to be a saver. She used to save for everything that she needed, and those are the lessons that I learned from her, because she used to be part of a stokvel. So that stokvel paid for everything that we needed at home. So I guess with me, savings has always been part of my life. I knew that if I wanted something, I should save for it instead of getting into debt, because debt can be problematic. I know I also have some debt that I need to pay as well, but saving has been my savior.
Yeah, and I think at Just Money, guys, like, through our articles and all of our product offerings and our content, we want to break the stigma around the fact that debt is bad, right? I think having done so many interviews, I think that's one of the biggest questions that come through from listeners, especially on radio, is like, when is it bad debt? When is it good debt? So we obviously always say that bad debt is something that is not going to aid your financial wealth in the future. So it's not going to generate income for you. An example of good debt, obviously, is if it's paying towards your studies, something that's obviously going to benefit you in your future. If you're doing renovations to your home, that's an asset that continues to grow. If you're buying a vehicle, that's going to generate income because you're using it for construction purposes or whatever. So I think, if you look at the reality, is that not many of us in the world, it's not even just South Africa, can go through an entire lifetime without debt. And as long as you then equip yourself and educate yourself and empower yourself to make decisions that are going to better your life, we should not look at having debt. Obviously, being over indebted is a completely different story, but just having debt, like if you are able to manage that, keeping track of your credit score, paying off what you can as soon as you can, then I think that is someone who then has control over their finances, and that's ultimately what we want.
Yeah, having debt is not a bad thing at all sometimes, because you need it for your credit score. If you pay your debt every time or whenever there is a need to pay for it, you should do, because that improves your credit score. Your credit score, your creditors or your lenders will look at your credit score when they have to give you credit. So if they don't have to, if your credit score is 0, you will definitely get credit, but it won't be the amount that you actually want, and your interest rates will be higher compared to someone who actually has a good credit score. So it helps sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and you know, we just came out of Youth Month, June. We've done quite a few interviews in the media space around it, and one of the things that keeps on coming up is around this instant gratification, and how younger people, or the suspicion or the concern is usually around younger people who are making impulsive purchases due to the impact that their social media accounts have on them. And it's always a difficult one, because I don't think it just affects younger people. I think it's absolutely anyone who has social media. And like I said to a few people that I've chatted with, I think it's got a place. I think there's definitely a place for influencers, you know, in terms of brand credibility, people reviewing products. But if you're making purchases for the sole reason that someone else who you admire has made a purchase, then I think we're treading on something slightly different. So I don't know, Erica, do you have any thoughts on that? I know you're not a massive social media network person, but I mean, what are your insights on that?
You know, yeah, back in the day, now I'm showing my age, social media wasn't really that big of a thing to start with. Like Facebook got off to a slowish start, and but there was still a lot of pressure, you know, the right shoes, the right clothing. And I remember for me growing up, I went to a private school. I was very, very lucky to have been able to do that. And a lot of the folk that went there had really expensive homes, clothing brands and so forth. So the pressure was definitely there, and I remember it clearly. My saving grace was that we simply didn't have the money for me to splash out on those things. So there wasn't even a point of going home to my parents and saying, I want Nike shoes. I mean, I would have been laughed off the stage. I wouldn't have even considered doing it. So it was tricky. I think those young formative years are really difficult, because you feel like people are looking at you, and actually they are. You know, that's what teens are like. But I think one of the benefits as you get older is that you realize that, as you said, there are certain brands that deserve the influencers, you know, that credibility that they get from the influencers, and those reviews, those are always worthwhile. But I think buying a brand for the sake of that brand is something that you grow out of. I think most people grow out of that. And if they haven't, guys, honestly, please do not try to keep up with the Joneses. You're not going to impress anyone in the long run, and you're going to end up with a lot less money than you otherwise would have if you'd invested it sagely. So I think, yeah, for me, I derive no interest from what is trendy. Honestly, I don't. And I think that was the blessing of growing up with relatively little money. I learned that lesson early in life. So yeah, for me, I suppose I can't really comment now on that, but that was what I learned quickly growing up. You're not going to die if you don't have the Nike shoes. It's going to be fine. And in 5 years, no one's going to remember what anyone was wearing. So yeah.
I do think though that because I remember like it was yesterday what it was like to be a teen, and I've got a 9-year-old daughter who's heading into her teens in the next few years. But I remember, you know, my mom only being able to afford a pair of tackies that she bought at Pep, and going to school in that, and the complete and kids are cruel, guys, and I think even more so now. It wasn't fun, and I can understand being in that space is really not. And then you also get, as a result of that, kids then doing things that they're perhaps not supposed to do to attain that kind of sort of status. But yeah, it's a difficult one, and I think it's crazy because I remember my parents saying, one day when you're big, you'll understand. And now I do. But having your child, I now have a daughter, the same thing. It doesn't make sense to them. Like they literally have to navigate this road and this journey of their teens and their tweens for themselves.
Yeah.
Like, I genuinely don't believe you can learn from someone else's mistakes. Like my parents told me that. And until today, I'm like, yeah, well, I just hope I remember that when I'm raising my teenager, because it's not going to work.
Yeah, it always goes back to what you can afford, because I always buy things that I need. I don't just buy things for the sake of having them. I always ask myself, do I need it? And I have a weakness for clothes, so I always go shopping for clothes, even if I don't have money. But if I see something that I like, I'm like, I like this. But then I lay by it so that even if I lose interest next week, I don't lose so much, because you only pay like 20 Rand for lay-by. So you don't really lose that much. So I just go back and think about it. Do I really need it before I purchase it?
Yeah, yeah. And that brings me kind of to maybe the second last topic is we're currently in the tax season. Okay, it's kind of just started. And something that in previous years, you know, we always talk about how important it is to set goals, right? And that includes the fun goals. That includes the, you know, at the end of the year, I'd like to have a holiday with my family. And that used to kind of be the thing that I kind of held on to every year, knowing that come December, I'm going to be off for 2 weeks and we're going to do this, that, and the other. And so my tax return was always used for that. Something to spoil myself, something to spoil my family. And I've just like as recent as yesterday, I've had sort of a change in mindset in that we have no idea what the next few months are going to have in store for us. And so I'm besides the pandemic or the fact or the restrictions in place where you might not likely be able to get away physically, but I've also thought like for rainy days, like something might happen, and if the last year is anything to go by, guys, we just don't know. So I also want to encourage people not to splurge when they do get something like a bonus. For those who are still lucky to get that, a 13th check or a payout from SARS. Like really, if you don't know what to do with it, maybe just put it aside for now, because things will come up. And so, for example, something I always used to do as well is before splurging on a spoil for my family, I'd always pay my kids' school fees for the following year. Just so that January comes, it is a shock, no matter how many times you do this as a parent, to pay for school fees, extramural activities, traveling, all those stationery, and those lists are insane. All of that has to be done in Jan. And so I always try and keep that at the back of my mind in tax season, especially if you're not someone who gets a bonus, that this is going to be dedicated towards that. It really just helps. And we've got to start planning like that. It is so important. Yeah. So guys, maybe just a lot. Yeah, Ati.
So another thing the advice that I have for people regarding saving is that you should automate your savings. You know, the thing about saving is just it gets addictive. The more you see money in your bank account, the more you want to save. So if you automate your savings, it just make sure that you forget about that money. If you automate it, like you forget about it and you don't touch it and you don't get tempted to spend it. It just gets addictive. So just try it, even if it's just for 2 months. If it just start small, you know. Even if it's just 50 rands, and then you're going to, when you see 200 rand in the next two months, you're really gonna get motivated. You're gonna start thinking, oh my goodness, this is doable. Let me just go do it. You know. Yeah.
100%. Yeah, I mean, I think there's just so much uncertainty right now, and so I think all these little bits of advice could definitely be useful. I just want to maybe, as the last thing, touch on our personal favorite items on our website, which is justmoney.co.za, that we feel offer our readers and our watchers really valuable information when it comes to saving. So Erica, I don't know if you want to kick us off.
Yeah, sure. So my favorite part of the site is the written content, the articles. The reason being that because we always contact expert sources, the information is not something that's necessarily readily available elsewhere. So you can Google for bank accounts that offer reasonable interest rates, let's say, or bank fees. But with our expert sources, we've got access to up-to-the-minute information, which is super useful. So just by reading the daily article that's published, people will equip themselves with the information that they need to make smarter decisions. And there is so much stuff that it's not necessarily common knowledge. Some of it is, but there are clever hints and tips that you would never guess if you didn't go through that. So for me, information is power. Equip yourself just by reading the article of the day. If that's all you do, it is a fabulous start.
Awesome. Thanks, Erica. Ati?
For me, it's the deals. I mean, I'm the one who does those deals. So you know, when I'm going through it and I see some nice deals, and then think about our readers and be like, no, actually, people could really save here a lot of money here. I just go to restaurant deals, you know, hotel deals, spa deals, you know, retail deals, bank deals. Those are my favorite because they really save people a lot of money. Those discounts are really helpful. And another thing is our savings calculator. You know, where you see your investment accounts, you compare investment accounts and credit cards and interest rates and the returns that you could get from different investment accounts and credit cards. You know, that is my favorite. You know.
Yeah, you know what I love about the deals? It's not my absolute favorite, but the one thing I love about deals is it tells people that just because we're going through the most as a country, as a united force, like all of us across the globe, we're all going through the same thing. Like life doesn't really stop, and so we still want to be able to spoil ourselves safely, obviously. And I still do takeouts. Obviously, I'm not going to sit down in restaurants or anything like that. But once in a while, it's really nice to know that there is a place where you can go where you can get 2-for-1 deals, which seems to be quite a popular deal on our site at the moment. I think for me, it's definitely around the access to free coaches. It's quite new for us at Just Money. I think we launched it in Feb this year. But basically, for me, when we're talking about basics and we go back to budgeting, I think the big thing is always being in control of and understanding and improving your credit score. And to be able to sign up for that for absolutely free and get access to real people, so no bots, who can then guide you to making those better decisions. I think that's something that's really gold. And I don't think a lot of people are actually offering that as a free service. So I think for me, having access to coaches for absolutely free is an amazing benefit of anyone coming through the Just Money site.
I just wonder if our readers are taking advantage of that, because that's a really cool offer. I mean, I would really love to have someone that I do not even pay for to just give me advice on finance and everything, you know, and my credit score, on personal loans and everything. It would be really nice to have someone to talk to about that, you know, that free advice. I hope that our readers are using it.
Yeah, 100%, Ati. So guys, we just hit the 30-minute mark. And I think that wraps up the first podcast for Just Money. I want to thank you both, Erica and Ati Nkosi. It's always lovely chatting to you. And
likewise.
Tackle the next one, hopefully next month.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.